Hey Earthlings, hello and welcome back. This is Roger Yates and Aruja with the bum in the air. Say hello, dear fans, Rouge. So, I had mixed feelings about this one because I tried to be optimistic about things, and I realised that in terms of rights and welfare, there's very little to be optimistic about. We don't have an animal rights movement. We only have something that calls itself that, but it's an animal welfare movement. And a few things in recent times have kind of underlined that yet again for me. It's real kind of continuing disappointment, but as a sociologist, it shouldn't be in a way, because, I mean, obviously I understand socialization processes, that we're born into societies which are drenched in speciesist values. Now, one part of that is the ideology of animal welfarism. And so we're all born into a society that's not only speciesist, is also deeply embedded in the norms and values of animal welfare. And that basically says that animal use is not the issue. It's animal treatment and the way that we treat them. And that's the thing to focus on. And, it's the worst forms of animal abuse rather than animal use, which is the issue. So these are kind of welfare concerns. And we do find that these are just replicated within the so-called animal rights movement over and over again. And to the extent that, you're kind of forced to agree with Gary Francione, who's been arguing since the 1990s that we don't have an animal rights movement. I often talk about how there was the beginnings of it, or the potential for it, in the 1990s when Tom Regan's views were prominent. But it didn't take long for the welfare corporations to squash all that and to reassert animal welfarism as a dominant idea in the animal rights movement. So we've always had welfare corporations like PETA, for example, promoting Peter Singer's animal liberation, never promoting Tom Regan's The Case for Animal Rights, presumably on the grounds that Peter Singer's animal welfarism is easier to sell. It's less, you could say, less rule bound. Now, it's interesting because, some of the modern spokespersons, they really kind of take a kind of fairly kind of strict welfare line, and it's almost astonishing, really, because they tend to present themselves as radical. And in fact, one of them, Carbstrong, tends to seem to enjoy this idea that he's, the most extreme vegan extremist in the world, and all this kind of rhetoric, and seems to kind of play up to that, and yet just keeps coming out with this animal welfare stuff. In a recent review of one of the TV appearances that he did around Veganuary, he said this.
Isn't it everything in moderation, though? Yeah. It doesn't have to be healthier. Just in the same way you've got fast food options with meat, you can have fast food options.
Yeah, hang on, let's just... Yeah, but we're trying to abolish the worst abuse and cruelty to animals on Earth.
So that's just pure animal welfarism. The idea that we're about to abolish the worst abuses and cruelty to other animals. This is just pure down the line welfarism. Also in these programs, the presenter, there's a whole series of them now. These presenters talk about animal welfare all the time. Carbstrong never ever corrects the people and never pulls them up on that. In a similar way, Earthling Ed was on a TV thing, and he ended up talking to some guy who was a butcher but also ran his own slaughterhouse, and got bogged down in a welfare argument about the percentage of times when the stunning system was, whether it worked or not, like this.
I feel that I can offer my customers the traceability, the welfare, and also how those animals are looked after and fed.
Can you tell me how they're looked after and fed?
Yes, I can tell you how they're looked after and fed. We actually go and visit the farms. We actually have an abattoir as well.
And how are they killed in the abattoir?
So they're killed in the abattoir. This is not a debate on killing methods, or this is a debate on environmentalism.
But can you tell me how they are killed in the abattoir?
Well, they're electrocuted, so they're knocked out cold, and then they.
But it doesn't always work, though, does it?
It does work.
It doesn't always work, though, does it?
We have vets there watching everything. We're even on CCTV.
Now, from an animal rights point of view, this is totally irrelevant. You know, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter if the stunning system worked 100% of the time. What goes on in a slaughterhouse, a house of slaughter, are rights violations. And it doesn't really matter how you fancy things up and how many procedures on welfare grounds that you bring about. It doesn't ever get around the fact that they're committing animal rights violations. And yet we never talk about that. We never talk about our fundamental position because, well, going back to the beginning, it's not our fundamental position. That's my problem. I've always kind of taken animal rights advocates seriously and assumed that they are abolitionist animal rights advocates, and yet when you hear what they got to say and their values, they're not. They're welfarists. You know, Francione was right. You know, we've got a movement which is called the Animal Rights Movement. It's actually an animal welfare movement. Then there's a recent action in Northern Ireland at a pig farm, which was supposedly chosen randomly, but now it's kind of been singled out as a one-man-apple case, to the extent that, well, you know, activists from all over the world came to Northern Ireland for this action. I don't really know whether they knew they were going to be suckered into a welfare campaign, but that's what's happened. I mean, there's even a petition going around focusing on this one farm, not talking about the fact that this is all standard, asking for this one farm to be closed down because it's not meeting its welfare standards. And complaining, like, for example, there's no bedding, no straw for the pigs to lie down. It's pure kind of animal welfare. So even in the grassroots, you know, where you'd expect them to be a little bit more resistant to the welfare corporations, the national ones, it's not happening. You've got welfarism. It's just like the entire movement is steeped in animal welfarism, wherever you look. And then the final point that I wanted to make is to do with Tom Regan's Culture and Animals Foundation. And this is really sad in the sense that Tom Regan is the originator of rights-based animal rights when he published the groundbreaking book The Case for Animal Rights in 1983. And now if you look at the Culture and Animals Foundation, there's like one tag to Tom Regan, and yet it seems as though it's getting less and less important. For example, one of the recent advisors to the board being appointed is Peter Singer, and Regan clashed with Singer throughout his professional life as a philosopher because they don't agree on animal rights philosophy. Tom Regan is an animal rights philosopher, and Peter Singer doesn't believe in moral rights. And now he's an advisor for the Tom Regan Foundation. And not only that, they lie about Singer. They say that Animal Liberation, the book from '75, promotes animal rights and veganism, and neither of which is true. You know, Singer is not even a dietary vegan, certainly not when travelling. He's a flexible plant eater, you know. And now we've got these lies. You know, there's kind of corruption in this movement, runs deep. And it means that, you know, from my point of view, I'm not quite sure there's ever going to be an animal rights movement. I mean, you know, bigger and brighter people than me, Tom Regan, tried and failed, was marginalised, kicked in the teeth, continues to. I've said before, you know, it's you know, the shocking footage of these animal welfare creeps clapping away after Reagan is inducted into the Animal Rights Hall of Fame. You know, the likes of Mercy for Animals and Animal Equality, all smirking there with their frigging suits on, clapping away at animal rights theorist who's only just after death being inducted into the Animal Rights Hall of Fame, and there they are spending millions on their cage-free corporate campaigns through grants from the Open Philanthropy Project. It's all corrupt, you know. I mean, Reagan was, you know, maybe Reagan did make a mistake. Francione says Reagan made a mistake. He should have struck out with Francione and both became mavericks and started their own movement. Reagan decided to try to influence the existing movement, and it just chopped him down, it just marginalised him, it just kicked him in the teeth at every single opportunity, including now after death. You know, it's absolutely incredible. So I'm not quite sure whether we're ever going to get a chance of ever having an animal rights movement. I'm very pessimistic about it, you know, because you know, when the new people come into the movement, you tend to think, ooh, you know, fresh blood and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, you know, social movement theory says all that, you know, the injection of this new kind of stuff. And you expect the new people to either be more radical than the existing people in the first place, but also interested in the radical aspects of it. But I don't find that. What I find is that these new people who are joining the movement, rather than being interested in the radicalism of the movement and looking at the history and the radical values of the people who founded, for example, the vegan movement, they're content with a more moderate version, a corporatized version. They're more content with the 1970s definitions of veganism, for example, than they are of the really radical stuff from the 1940s. This is kind of shocking, really. You know, these young people are just fitting into this mediocre, kind of moderate pile of shite, which we call the animal rights movement, but is really an animal welfare movement. It's so disappointing. You know, where are the radicals? Where have they gone? You know, what happened? Where the new? I'm pessimistic, as you can tell, and so a little more to say. I mean, I sometimes think, well, you know, they made a mistake, you know, that they've said an animal welfare thing really where they meant an animal rights thing, but they don't. They mean it. They're animal welfarists. We've got a movement of animal welfarists. And I suppose rather than me just whinging about it, I ought to just come to terms with the fact that the movement that calls itself animal rights is actually animal welfare, and probably always will be. And it's run by corporate welfarists, and all the new people coming into the movement just get socialized within the movement. They just slot right in there with the welfare stuff. You know, Joey Carbstrong, oh, it's all about the worst abusers. No, it isn't. That's not animal rights. You know, I mean, Earthling Ed probably rejects animal rights as a theoretical thing. He was on the Cosmic Skeptic, and they both seem to have a pretty anti-rights position. Philosophically, I don't think Carbstrong would have that, because he probably hasn't read a page of animal rights theory in his life. So it's more to do with he's just slotted into the existing movement, you know. Too busy being the militant to read anything, I suppose. Anyway, signing off. See you again. Bye for now.